2, 1. Welcome to the June 7th meeting of the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee agenda. On members of the committee are myself, Mike O'Connor, Gladys Blackmore, John Laners, and Mayor Jackie Clayton. I'm hoping Jackie may not be with us. I think she's on a call to the minister. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. There are no delegations, and the first report is 3.1, Director Service Area Report. Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. We'll start off in economic development. Between May 16th and 31st, we sent congratulations letters to 13 new businesses. As well, we hosted an economic development mixer we're about to host a mixer for representatives of the health and wellness services sector on June 16th. For grants, we had one development incentives grant, for business revitalization approved, as well as 2 economic recovery grants. We're also working with the permitting department on refining a proactive approach to ensuring that every time we issue a building permit that they receive information on our grant programs, just to try and have as wide a net as possible so that we're getting people involved. As well, the team, the economic development team, is at the Global Energy Show alongside the county and the municipal district of Greenview in Calgary this week. In environment, we have done a pilot program with the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance and Northwestern Polytechnic on a small research program in Pinnacle West for the Storm Pond, where we are installing small floating pads for the duration of the summer, and the intent is to understand the impact of plant material on water quality. For Environment Week, June 5th to 11th, the city is encouraging active modes of transportation, including walking, cycling, and skating to get to work, and also encouraging carpooling and virtual meetings. In engineering services, we closed the RFP for the road condition assessment and pavement management system update, the RFP for the road rehabilitation 2023 design and construction supervision services, the tender for 132nd Avenue and 97B Street intersection traffic signals and geometric upgrades. And moving on to transportation, we are well underway residential street sweeping and are expecting to complete that by the end of June. Our stormwater stormline flushing program has also started along arterial roads and in industrial areas. In parks, mowing operations are going at full pace currently, and we are currently working through our second rotation for parks. The tree crew has been addressing some of the damaged trees from the recent weekend wind. Our annual flowers arrived last week, so our ornamental parks crews are out planting flowers across the city. We've also recently installed 24 new picnic table pads, and we'll then be installing the picnic tables. And our RFP for wildlife control services has closed, and we're in the process of awarding that contract. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Glavin? Seeing none, you get off the hook. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item 3.2, land use bylaw requirement, notification of adjacent property owners, and presenting is Mr. Reid DeRoche.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. As part of our development permit process, the city sends notices to adjacent property owners when an application is received for a discretionary use or when a variance exceeding 10% is required. Notices are sent by mail, and the process typically accounted for 2 days for delivery. The reason for this review is in early April, a delegation appeared at council with concerns related to a home-based business application, and one of their concerns was that the delay from Canada Post resulted in them only having about 8 days to respond to the notice, and if they were to send in a letter response as well, it may not be received in time for their comments to be considered. And so council directed administration to look at opportunities to improve this process. The notice requirement for adjacent property owners is strictly in the city's land use bylaw. It is not a requirement of the Municipal Government Act. and most other municipalities only provide a notice of decision, which is the Municipal Government Act requirement. The city provides notices to adjacent property owners to be able to consider their feedback when they're actually considering a development permit. Sorry, is there a, okay. So typically, if you only provide a notice of decision, then the adjacent property owner's only recourse is an appeal. However, in the case of a variance or a discretionary permit, the development officer can consider standards somewhat beyond the actual strict standards of the land use bylaw in order to consider the unique circumstances of the application or the context. And so part of this can be informed by the residents' input. So an example of something like that would be that the proposed home business would require loud machinery in the garage, which is next to my bedroom. And although those types of things are restricted by the current standards, it can help to support the development officer's decision or flag something they hadn't noticed or that's unique to that particular site. Another example for something like a variance may be neighborhood character. So in an example of, say, a garage suite where a suite is proposed over a garage, a neighboring property owner may say, hey, the proposed variance on the height for this structure is way out of character for this neighborhood and will detract from the overall neighborhood appearance. And so the development officer can consider those types of comments in either the decision of whether or not to refuse or grant the permit, and also on specific conditions they put in the permit. So there's a benefit to having that opportunity before the decision is made, rather than leaving the only recourse as an appeal, because it can create a smoother process for both the applicant and adjacent property owners. And so the LUB states that there's a requirement to send out this notice. It does not provide a timeline for how long the adjacent owner has to respond. We typically aim to provide them with 2 weeks to respond. And to compare that to our other notifications, when we circulate other agencies on a similar permit, they're given 10 days to respond. So we try to give them a sufficient amount of time to provide feedback on that permit for it to be considered in the decision. Based on the feedback received in April, we adjusted our internal process to account for 5 days for the mail to be delivered rather than the 2 that we typically experienced in the past. However, this adds about 3 days to the actual decision timeline. One thing we explored is, why do we use letter mail? We don't have owner emails, and we can't hand deliver letters because in many cases, owners live in other cities. Registered mail has been tried in the past, but it's created frustration with property owners because they have to go to a secondary location to pick it up rather than receive it at their home. And so that was not continued as a process. And then in terms of actual responses, the adjacent property owners can respond either by sending us an email, writing a letter mail, or dropping off a response at the city building. So as part of this review, we adjusted our internal process, but we're also providing potential alternatives for council's and committee's consideration. So the first one is just continuing with the same process. The second one, which is the one we've implemented currently, is just increasing the notice timeline to account for delays in mail delivery. However, this creates a decision delay on the actual permit. Another option is to discontinue mail notices and try requiring a sign posted on the property. Currently, a sign is only required during the appeal period, so that's only after a decision has been made, and so we could revise the process to have the sign posted on the property during the decision period. Another alternative would be to discontinue the written notice to adjacents altogether, and this potentially speeds up the decision timeline. So the primary issue that we were reviewing these standards in consideration of was a postal delay, and we've addressed that by adjusting our internal processes. Council requested that we explore different options for improving the process, and so we've provided that overview. Some of those options will require amendments to the land use bylaw. Others may be addressed through internal processes. And so we're providing this report for information. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much for that comprehensive report. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair O'Connor. My questions are a little bit of a need for clarification. So you've already implemented increasing the notification by an additional 5 days, or you're considering doing that?
Thank you. Through the chair. So we have increased it. It's by 3 days, so to give 5 days for the mail to arrive, because it's an internal process, so there isn't any required approvals to adjust that. It's just something we do internally.
Okay. And so if you were to receive a motion to stick with the status quo, you would no longer provide that extra 3-day period, or that 3-day period is now part of the status quo? I'm unclear about that.
To the chair, to clarify that, we have implemented the adjusted option. Continuing with the status quo would be just allowing for 1 to 2 days. And since the actual there's no stated required period for them to have the letter to be able to provide feedback, we would simply send it out and allow for that 1 to 2 days. And the period that they get to respond would be based on mail delivery.
Somehow in your answer, you lost me.
So, okay. Through the chair, I kind of realized that at the end. So,
Would it add, the status quo includes the 3 days or doesn't include the 3 days?
So the status quo, could I rephrase it? Sorry, I didn't write the report, and the way the report's written, we've adjusted the process to incorporate those 3 days, but the way it's written is the status quo would be not to do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Reid. The chair recognizes Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. The way that administration would action this, so the recommendation is currently to receive the report for information. If council chose to receive the report for information, we'd continue with the current practice, which has now been adjusted to 5 days. So right now, our administrative practice that isn't in the land use bylaw is to give people 2 weeks plus the 5 days. And we adjusted that from the previous practice after the delegation came to committee, when there was some general support for increased amount of times to ensure that people have the full 2 weeks to respond. So we've adjusted that internally without any council formal direction. We could bake this into the land use bylaw or something to that effect if we chose to. But right now, if this report's received for information, we'll continue with the 5 days plus the 2 weeks.
Yeah. Councilor Blackmore, you have supplemental?
I may have. I have to think about this for a minute.
Okay. Councilor Laners.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Yeah, there's always a balance, right? Like if we start adding days, we'll have developers and homeowner businesses, people screaming, say the process takes forever. So, I'm sure that's where it's landed right now. I can probably live with that 5 days. Right now, when you're not doing registered mail, you're just going on the title and sending it to wherever that title is. Is that how you're doing it, or how are you? If you're not doing, how do the owners get the mail? How do they know? How do you know? Because based on their tax roll or what?
Thank you. Through the chair, our GIS department maintains a data set of landowner mailing addresses, and I would have to verify. I believe that's taken from registry data. And so the development officer collects that data from our mapping tool.
Okay. So if that's the case and we're all happy with that, and we're giving them 5 days, and they've got an opportunity still to appeal. If they got their 10 days notice, they write a letter, they haven't relinquished their appeal thing, they could still appeal it as well. So they got 2 kicks at the cat.
Through the chair, yes, this is in addition to the notice of decision that they will receive after the decision is made. And once after they receive that letter for the notice of decision, they have 21 days to appeal. There's also a sign posted on the property for that.
Oh gosh, that's lots of time to rebut. I'm okay with just leaving. I'd make a motion that we accept this report for information.
That motion is in order. Please call the question.
You had some other questions, didn't you, Gladys?
Sorry, my bad. Go ahead, Councillor Black.
I just am not sure that we need to add any period of time. We had one complaint. Have we ever received other complaints Director Glavin in the past about the length of time that we allow for, and this is for discretionary use, correct?
You do the chair. Yes, discretionary uses and variances exceeding 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the old status quo myself more than the new status quo. So I'm not sure that, considering that it was kind of a loosey-goosey thing to change it in the first place, we could go back to goosey-loosey and flip it back to,
So does that mean you're going to withdraw your motion and restate?
Well, no, again, it's the definition of status, well, I guess. Okay, so I'll add some clarity to the motion, yes.
Okay. I'm going to recognize Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. And just to address the first question of how often this happens, it's probably maybe once a year or so that we have someone who is unsatisfied with the length of time they get to respond, but it's not a common thing that we deal with. And as far as the administrative practice, administration, at the end of the day, we can do 2 days, we can do 5 days. There is no, as you read in the report, there is no legal reason why we have to give any notice in here. This is something that the city of Grande Prairie does uniquely that many other municipalities don't.
Okay. So do you want to make an amendment to the motion or go back or just leave it, take
Well,
it for
I
information?
think it's for information, but I think it's, but I think with the direction that we go back to, or that we continue with the way it was originally, 2 days, because that's been kind of done in the last little bit, but the practice has always been 2 days, and accepting the fact that to continue the old practice of going with 2 days delivery notice. So it's kind of, yeah.
I would feel that, 5 days is not neither here nor there, and I was one of the people that was making sure that we notified people. But however, I'll go with the group. If administration wants this, well, I'm okay with it.
I'll just leave it. Yeah, I like that.
I called the question. I did. No, I was wondering why you weren't voting. Okay. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for your report. Thank you, Reed. Didn't mean to put you on the spot, but good job. Okay. Moving on, we're going to move to 3.3, Snow and Ice Control Policy. And on the floor is Mr. Robert Carroll. Take it away, Robert.
Thanks, Chair O'Connor, and thanks for the opportunity to give an update as to where we are in the review of our snow and ice control policy. And we will be later in the year bringing back a revised policy for committee and council to look at, and hopefully have something in place by the beginning of winter season next year, or later on this year. It's nice to talk snow in June, where it's so beautiful out, and people's focus probably is not on snow and ice control, but in transportation, we're always thinking about snow and how we can improve our services. So I'm going to give an update as to some of the work that we've done over the past almost year when this was first brought up as a direction from council. The council had the report. It's a report of a year-long culmination of work that we've done, and it was initiated by council to review the current service levels, compare them to other similar municipalities, and prepare some costed options for review. The internal review, the report provides information and analysis on the city demographics, the commuter and climate data. It provides some information on the current service standards that's outlined in Policy 606, that's Snow and Ice Control Policy. It's a comparison of similar municipalities in Alberta and Canada with respect to priority road snow clearing and ice control standards, staffing and contracted operations, communication practices, cost comparisons, benchmarking, and innovation, and costing of possible levels of service adjustments for Policy 606. The communities that we consulted with, there was 6 of them, and 3 were within Alberta, and 3 were from other parts of Canada. What we kind of found with our interviews with these municipalities that we're all similar, but we're all different, and such things as obviously the climate conditions of these the locations of these communities dictate a lot of the practices. And the budget and the comparison between each municipality, you can see that we did a population and budget comparison on this bar graph, and the budgets go from around 4 million to over 8 million, depending on what city it is and what the population is. So many municipalities indicated that in 2021 and beyond, they did increase their snow and ice budgets. For example, Prince George noted that they were up to 10 million this past year. So these are 2020 numbers that we have here. So that's the latest data that we had. And the numbers vary. It's hard to compare apples to apples when you're talking about budget comparisons between municipalities because all municipalities seem to track things differently. So we did the best we could and tried to get a reasonable comparison between all of the municipalities, and that's indicated in that graph. The review findings, as I said earlier, the Grande Prairie is comparable to similar municipalities with their winter programming, and the difference between municipalities were noted in the following characteristics: the type and volume of infrastructure that was cleared, the available of snow storage adjacent to roadways, which was a big one, the available budget and staff resources, the access to contracted services, and community values, preferences, and the big thing is historical practices. I mean, just how things have always been done. And we noted that there's a lot of historical reasoning why we do what we do, and it's the same in Grande Prairie. Levels of service. Proposed changes to consider for Policy 606 include defining levels of service and time standards for the following services. Right now, we don't have a time standard defined for clearing of our pathways and trails. There's no time standard that's defined for windrows, clearing up windrows on Priority 1 collector roads. There's no time standard for transit stops, and we don't have any information in our policy concerning extreme cold and cold weather events. Obviously, the policy is set up for typical conditions, but we need some information in there about how we change our operations depending on heavy snowfalls, back-to-back snowfalls, or extreme cold. This is a graph, a little bit hard to understand, but I'll explain it the best I can. This is an overview of how resources are currently allocated immediately following a significant snow event. As you can see that activities in day 1 to 5 are where we're concentrating our efforts on Priority 1 and Priority 2 roads. And all of these activities, with the exception of the residential snow removal, are carried out by internal forces. And once the priority tasks are completed, once we get the roads cleared and the snow is either piled into windrows or hauled away, we redeploy our staff to other other activities that are less a priority. Pushing snow back to make room for more snow, picking some snow piles up, and such things like that.
Mr. Carroll, can I interrupt you right
Yes.
there on that graph? Can you go back one slide? Can you say, what does the green mean versus the blue?
Okay, I gotta get down to this. The blue is our when we're working on our Priority 1 roads, and the green is Priority 2. Okay. So costed options, we looked at costing some options with respect to transit stops, special zones such as downtown, or active mobile pathways and multi-use trails, windrow removal on priority 2 roads, and a residential snow removal program. The transit stops, for instance, we looked at if council wished to consider a higher level of service on transit stops, with all stops being broken down into priority 1 and priority 2 stops, and cleared within 24 and 48 hours at the end of snowfall, costs would be estimated as follows. If we do it on a contracted basis, we're looking at between $37,000 and $75,000 per year. Using internal resources, between $130,000 to $150,000 per year. Keeping in mind that when we do these comparisons between contracted and internal, internal means that we're hiring people. And when these specific tasks are done, such as when transit stops are complete, those staff are available to be redeployed to other operations. And when we're contracted, obviously the cost is lesser, but we don't have that option of redeploying contractors when they're done their job. They're hired for a specific task, and when that task is done, they leave us and we pay the bill. Special zones downtown. The city's downtown core does receive a high level of service already, and even if a higher level of service is desired, it could include the following enhanced services. Clearing all the sidewalks downtown by city crews or contractor crews, clearing roads 12 hours from the end of snowfall, in addition to clearing them 24 hours at the end of snowfall. That's up from our level of service right now, where we clear the roads at the 24-hour mark. And clearing our lanes. Our lanes right now, they're on kind of a as-needed basis, no service standard on them, but to clear lanes within 72 hours at the end of snowfall, we have costed that option also. And as far as sidewalk service goes, we could provide the service, but keeping in mind that if we do, it's providing service to businesses downtown that other businesses in the city don't receive. Whereas the other businesses outside of downtown core are responsible for clearing their sidewalks. Keep in mind that plowing the downtown lanes is plowing the lanes. It's not picking up the snow and taking it away, which, depending on the amount of snow we get and the kind of year that we get, it may be a requirement that we move in with a completely other crew to pick the snow up. That means blowing it into trucks and hauling it to the snow dump. The costs associated there is just with plowing them. And this slide is to clear the sidewalks into downtown. This is an option to, the last slide was contracted. This is to do it with city resources. Stating again that, by hiring city staff, full-time staff for the winter, it gives us the opportunity to redeploy that staff to other activities such as other operations or filling in for vacancies and sickness and that type of thing. Pathways and trails. If council wishes to explore an increased level of service on pathways and trails, they could consider the following enhancement: clearing all of the priority 1 defined pathways and trails within 48 hours at the end of snowfall, and clearing the priority 2 trails within 96 hours after the end of snowfall. This will cost an extra $45,000 to $55,000 per year internally to hire 1 more full-time staff on night shift. Windrow pickup. Our current level of service is that we're recommending we put into the policy is that the windrows are picked up 10 days after the priority 1 roads are cleared. So that's 11 days after the end of the snowfall. And these are weekdays we're talking here also. And if the council wishes that we look at an improved level of service there by picking windrows up within 5 days after the priority 1 roads are clear, and that's a small typo in the slide where the possible change should be windrows removed within 5 weekdays from the end of priority 1 plowing. So it would cost $91.8 $1,000 per rotation to increase that level to 5 days instead of 10 days. Residential, right now our residential service, we're funded for between 3 and 5 rotations per winter, and the trigger being 10 centimeters of snow. If council wants to look at increasing the amount of rotations that we do in residential by lowering that trigger to maybe 7 centimeters or even 5 centimeters, a residential rotation costs between $200,000 and $250,000. Some operational considerations with respect to the enhanced communications. We could further develop targeted snow and ice control public communications and explore additional software and mapping technologies to support real-time reporting and notifications. And we are working on a system right now that will feed some information back to the public about where we are in residential and even stretching that into our priority 2 roads, reporting back on what's been done and giving some almost live information about where we're at with our programs as far as our residential and our priority 2s, and we'll be rolling some of that out for next season. We can consider opportunities for integration as far as procurement goes, integration of the benefit-driven procurement into snow and ice contracting. This is outside of the snow and ice control review, but procurement department is actually looking to include benefit-driven procurement principles into future contracts throughout the city. And if you're not familiar with benefit-driven procurement, it's having another facet to companies who provide us with services other than the actual service they're providing. For example, if that company will provide opportunities for people who don't normally get to work for snow clearing companies, and have some programs in place to develop city people from the city who may not get the opportunity. It's a consideration that they're looking at not only for snow and ice control, but for a lot of our other programs that we provide. We're looking at to develop a comprehensive education enforcement protocol, including fines and procedures for non-snow compliance. When we have our parking bans, we obviously work with enforcement, and they talked about that with their report earlier, that we're looking, we communicate regularly with them, and we work as a team with that. And one of the refinements to the policy that we want to put in place is about scheduling our priority 2 roads. Right now, we do our priority 2 windrow and plowing on the same schedule that your residential program takes place. So if Monday's your normal day that you will get your residential program, your residential streets cleared, then that's the day that we will be working on our priority 2 roads in your area too. So it puts a little more predictability into our system, therefore enforcement can be more targeted. Extreme snow, as I talked a little bit about extreme snow and cold events, where we want to define extreme events in our policy, or create a procedure for department response during extreme snow and cold events. For instance, once a trigger is defined, extreme events could be declared, and an adjustment to our service levels could be the result of that. Also looking at, and I know a lot of the communities that we spoke to provide some sand to local residents, looking at maybe doing a pilot project of a community sandbox. And see what kind of feedback we get from that, and possibly either refining that or making a larger program. And such things as the Snow Angel program, which was took place a few years ago, and I think just because of staffing changes and that type of thing, it's not normally run through transportation and parks, but it was a program that was in place where you could recognize people who went above and beyond. For instance, if a neighbor who would come in and clear a sidewalk, you could nominate that person for a bit of recognition. So we're looking at possibly reviving that program with our winter season upcoming. So next steps and timelines, we're looking for some direction from committee today to kind of proceed with community engagement, and we've had some dates that have kind of been penciled in to be doing that, and get some feedback from the public about what they feel we're doing good, where we feel we should be try to improve, and looking for suggestions from the public on that. And with that information, and with information that we received from the workshop we had a couple months ago, and information that we may receive today, coming back with a report probably late August or September with recommendations for changes to the policy, and obviously if there's some budget requirements to implement these changes, they will be going through our budget process. With the intent of having a revised policy in place for 2022-23 snow season. And I'll be happy to take some questions.
Before I go to my fellow councillors, I just want to say, Robert, you and your department have gone above and beyond.
Okay.
You stop that over there. So I'm just wondering, I'll go to Councillor Blackmore first.
So, Mr. Carroll, I have some points that need clarification for me. One of them is maybe the most important one logistically is, are you referring to St. John's, Newfoundland, or St. John, New Brunswick? Because you alternate back and forth between the two spellings throughout the report.
Do we? Oh, wow. Okay. I thought that we were quite clear on that as a team when we put this report together. This is St. John, New Brunswick.
Okay.
Yeah. Not St. John's.
Okay, because I think the logo page is actually the city of St. John's that you have.
Oh, okay. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah,
So from now, you've incorporated into your report the requests and recommendations from council. Now you're going to go to a public process, and how will you capture the requests or concerns in the public to bring them back to council? Because if someone, for example, Councillor O'Connor's neighbor, who's very concerned about where snow is piled in his yard compared to the rest of the cul-de-sac or the rest of the street, how will you bring that information back to us?
Thanks, through the chair. So with the consultation sessions, we will collect the feedback, and if there's some requests from the public for enhanced services, then our next step would be to evaluate the possibility of providing that service, put a price tag on it, and there likely will be a price tag, and that will be part of the final presentation to council or to committee in late August with the price, the cost of the service enhancements that the council wanted, plus the price for the service enhancements that we get out of the public consultation, and then that'll be an item to be discussed at budget deliberations.
So this report will be expanded to include public consultation section.
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. If I have one more question, okay?
I might let you.
Okay. I'm going to assume that was a yes. You comment in your report on identifying priority 1 for bus stops, and my concern is that I don't see the priority being how many people use the bus stop as much as the mobility issues of the people using that bus stop. So I'm thinking that in my mind, a priority 1 bus stop may only have one person at it every day, but that person is mobility restricted. So to me, that's more important than a bus stop that has 37 able-bodied teenagers at it. So I'm not asking you to respond to that, but to keep that in mind, that I think for council, and for me in particular, the priority of bus stops is based on mobility and ease of access rather than quantity of people or numbers of people. Okay?
point, Councillor Blackmore. You're reading my mind. Councillor Laners.
Well, I'm in the point counterpoint mode today, so I'm going to say, so if we did all the transit stops, that's kind of the end point. But if I'm in a wheelchair, how do I get to that transit spot? Like, you got a lot of sidewalks to clean, and which sidewalks do you clean to get to that transit stop? So I don't think it's quite as simple as what you said. So I think that area needs to be explored a little bit more, because it's nice to have a clean spot, but if you can't get to it, it's like an island in the middle of an ocean, right? So, I'd like to see some clarity around that. Hopefully, the consultation process kind of looks at that. So I'm a big KPI guy, but on the other hand, I think you do assess probably fairly quantitatively the work you're doing and the results, and I think as part of the workshop. So when you're asking us lots of these things to go to set service standards, and I always get a little bit nervous because right now a lot of those are optional. So, if we had 6 feet of snow, chances are it'll be a while before we got to certain areas, and it's really weather dependent and it's really optional. So I'm nervous of switching optional things into mandatory things, because they do ring a lot. Because right now we're paying them through our residual staffing, because we're not dedicating staff. We're using staff when we're not using other staff. So I kind of like that model, and so I'm a little bit nervous when you ask us to set levels of service on those 4 or 5. Normally I would be all over that, but because they're optional services and they all come with big price tags, it's not just it's not like me saying, I want to get the priority road done in 24 hours and you get it done in 22 hours. Well, we're doing priority one right, no matter what. That's not an option. You're doing that. So, I'd be more curious in how efficient, how good, and how cost effective we are in dollars per kilometer of road in priority one. And, and so that's kind of, because that's not an option. That's something that we have to do. And so I'll be curious to see what comes out. Like, I could be convinced if everybody in town says, oh, wow, we definitely need to do this, that, and everything else. And I'm sure you'll bring that back and we can reflect on that as we move into budget, because the timing is just about perfect. So I'll be curious to see about that. But right now, I had one more thing, though. And yeah, when you talk to St. John or Prince George or whoever you're talking to, do they ever get I'd always be curious to see what is the complaint ratio. Like, it's one thing, the worst thing I think we could ever do is have a system that didn't get a single complaint all year long, because that means we're spending way, way too much money on a system. You have to find a balance where some people are, that aren't necessarily all happy, because happiness costs you a lot of dollars, right? And if we're putting money there, giving it to you, we're not giving it to homelessness or roads or wherever, right? So we have to find that balance. So I'd be curious to see what, if there's some kind of indicator, and even in our world, what our complaint level is. We must get so many service requests or gripes or whatever the heck people do to complain about snow removal, and I don't know if those other people keep track of that or not, but because it sounds weird, but that might be kind of an indicator as to how well we're doing, is based on our population. So I would be curious about that. It's like the conversation I had before. It's easy to say, we have so many accidents per intersection, but we could have the least amount of accidents per capita in all of Canada, and we would think, oh, we still have an accident, or we still have a complaint about our snow removal, so let's keep piling the money on it. And so, I don't know, I think, it's like taxes, right? You have to find a balance. And so I think that's an important. So I'll be curious to see what this communication, this event you're having, what people's thoughts are, and because usually you get a lot of the complainers, and so. But I'd like to have that incorporated somehow, is to say that satisfaction levels or something like that of people, and to me that's important. So those are just some general comments. I'm looking forward to the report, and so the incorporation and the decisions more so at that time. I don't think, hopefully you're not asking for a whole bunch of decisions today. So.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't know you were the guest speaker today, so ouch. Just wondering, I have a couple, I'll come to Councillor Bosch, and a couple of things I don't want the answer today. I think it's something that we should be looking at as council, is to maybe workshop some of this and then send it out to the city, because we have to consider in the budget process, how much is this, great service, like John says, how much is this going to cost us at the end of the day, and can we afford it? So I just want to have you think about this. We're a winter city. And so if our community cannot get around in winter because of the service level, then I think we've got a problem. So I really think that's important for us to focus at that. And we should be talking about and say, are we willing to spend $1 million on this? Or can we take it out? So I think that's important. The other thing I would like you to think about, no answer today, is that how long does it take to haul all to one dump site? When I saw, I think Prince George and one other, St. John, had multiple sites where they went and took and put the snow, then your trucks are not, they're being more efficient. But again, I don't need an answer today. Levels of service at transit stop to the concrete is the level, I think, that are persons with mobilities. Almost 10% of our population are seniors. And I don't know how many people utilize or have mobility issues. They can't go anywhere. And so again, along on the level of the sidewalks. Extreme snow and cold weather events, I think it's important that we do have a trigger that says, oh my goodness, we better hit this, otherwise people can't get to work. It's one of those things. So, and of course, I'll bring up the snow. You should have a choice of whether or not the snow goes on your corner or not. And so I think that should be part of the discussion when we do public consultation. So if there's anybody else, Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. My question is in regards to procedures with residential. Now, correct me if I don't remember this right, but did you say that we have contractors typically doing the residential clearing and not city staff? Is that right?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do these graders have gates on them? Like, do we require that our contractors have gates so that they take away the snow and so there's no extra cost of removing snow in driveways? Is that an issue?
Through the chair, the gates question comes up pretty much on a regular basis because they are used in some specific locations, mainly rural areas where you have lots of room between driveways. You can pick the snow up as you go past the driveway and dump it on the other side of the driveway. We had bought a couple of them probably 10, 12 years ago of the city, and we did trial them. They had very limited success because of the tight areas mainly that our equipment works in residential areas, and it's just not the right location to be using them. Rural areas maybe so, but just never seemed to be the right piece of equipment to use in our residential areas.
Right. Okay. I asked that because that is something that often comes up in questions from the public. So to be fair, that will probably answer, a gazillion people. Now, this sandbox idea, that's great, but were you thinking of picking them up in summer so that they're not like out and about on the sidewalks all year?
Through the chair, to be honest, we haven't delved too deeply into the location and the process that we may put in place to do these. It may just be small next year. Maybe a sandbox at the service center. To start things off and just see what the uptake on that is. I think would be a logical way to kind of start with this rather than deploying a couple dozen of them all around the city, because there is obviously operational costs associated with that, of servicing them and putting them out and probably taking them back in the springtime too. So, I think that we got to start out, slowly with that and just see what the public feedback is on that service and then go from there.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is cost as well as aesthetics. But, and then my last question is, this extreme cold policy that you're talking about, would that include, staff not working at a certain temperature or equipment not working at a certain temperature?
Through the chair, yes, that will be part of it. And most of the cities that we talk to have some sort of either that's in their policy or it's written that when the temperatures get to a certain level, that the operation is tuned down quite a bit, because not only because it's a lot of times ineffective trying to do snow removal when it's minus 44 degrees, for instance, but it certainly is difficult on equipment and hydraulics and that type of thing. So
when they
a lot
break.
of times you're out there, trying to provide service, and you're taking one step forward and two steps backwards by being out there. So this will clearly define, how we carry out our program at that temperature, whatever it is that we decided on being.
Can I ask one more to that one?
Not just yet. I'll get in the queue for a point, then I will come back to you. And then we'll need to go to Director Glavin. He has a couple of points. Would you like to do that now, or let us?
Sure. I just wanted to for some additional clarity just with the motion. So if we do proceed with the second motion that administration has proposed today, there's a couple things that have come up in the conversation that wouldn't be covered in the consultation as it's currently written. And those would be, right now would be giving the choice of residents whether or not they have snow piled on their yards. That wouldn't be something we would consult on. However, if that came up in consultations where somebody brought that forward, we'll definitely record it and bring that back as something that council would see, but wouldn't form part directly of the formal consultation. The second was clearing sidewalks to get to bus stops, which, in theory, just without a whole lot of analysis here, would be quite hard to determine, as that could be all sidewalks theoretically, and would be a very expensive program. So if there are things that committee would like to add to the consultation, I would just ask that you add them as part of that motion when you're, so table 2 and 3 in the report. Right now is what the recommendation is. If you would like us to consult on more things, just add them to the motion. And if there anything in table 2 or 3 that you don't like, if you could just reference that in the motion as well as something you do not want us to consult on. That's all, thanks.
Okay. I was going to jump in, but Councillor Bosch.
Jeez. Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Just in the extreme cold and then warming up, just based on last winter, is this review going to look at like sand versus chemical for ice, and then extreme cold and then melting and then ice, and how you, because there was some problems with just sand in the cold. It wasn't helping. So what do we do about that?
Through the chair, yes. The extreme cold conditions do make the product that we use, which is mainly sand, to be not as effective as it would be at warmer temperatures. And it's a fact that every city deals with these extreme cold conditions, because none of the obviously salt doesn't work at that temperature. We do have a pre-wetting capability where we can pre-wet our materials prior to them hitting the ground. It does provide somewhat of an improvement on adherence to the surface, but what we've seen that when it gets to these extreme cold conditions, you can put as much sand down as you want, but it's not going to adhere, especially if you're looking at icy intersections and lots of vehicle traffic. It can blow the sand to the side of the road quite quickly. I mean, the biggest thing is to be proactive enough with your program, be proactive enough with monitoring weather to kind of get ahead of it, so that we don't get those situations where we get these warm conditions and we get a flash freeze and there's accumulated snow on the road. So getting out there, getting the roads cleaned as quickly as we can, and it's last winter with industrial with the residential areas. We did get into a situation where we had an extreme warm event and then an extreme cold event, And we all know that we had some serious situations in our residential areas, and we did go in with sand. We sanded our residential areas more last year than we ever have. I think we were in 4 different times. But as I said earlier, it's not, a 100% effective product. It does provide some sort of relief, but the trick is not to allow the ice to accumulate to begin with, and that's the challenge that we face. Okay.
Yeah, and I just have 3 points that for consideration. There are one particular area in Highland Park. There are 8 lanes. That's their only access. And because the contractors are not city contractors, they don't know that they have to plow these lanes because you can't get a fire truck, you can't get an ambulance down these lanes. And so there are 8 of them in Highland Park. And so I've been fighting over the last couple of years to try and see that this snow is removed. And they look at you like, not our responsibility. So I'm just wondering, I'd like you to consider that. 2 is the ticket resolution. I'd like to have a discussion with somebody on how that resolution becomes resolved. And so there's a process thing that needs to be dealt with. And the last one is being proactive on the west side on 115th, I think, across from Costco, that whole area. Well, the area in the industrial park gets so much snowdrift that creates a huge problem. So I'm wondering if we can be proactive and put snow fence in that field. It's not our property, but I'm not sure how we stop the snow from blowing in across the prairie there. So those are my 3 points. Okay, thank you. And Councillor Blackmore.
I think we're probably ready for a motion. So I would move that committee recommend council accept the snow and ice control internal service review for information and direct administration to conduct community consultation regarding potential service level adjustments costed in Table 2 and 3 of this report prior to bringing back Policy 606 revisions for council consideration in September of 2022. And to also include neighborhood snow storage and options for identifying priority 1 bus stops.
Any other? Everybody okay with that motion? Councillor Bressy, then Councillor Laners.
Yeah, I've tried to keep my mouth closed because I was away for most of the meeting. Didn't want to rehash ground, but just a thought that I could actually say for council. I don't think if this comes to council, I don't know how much you folks want to spend debating this motion right now, but something I'd love to push for us to do some consultation on is also enforcement options. I think my personal opinion is we should get a lot more stringent enforcement on snow routes, but I don't know what the community appetite is, and that's something I'd love to get a better sense from our community on is, are they okay with the enforcement as it is, or would they like us to ticket more? Would they hate that? So just something for folks to consider.
I'd take that as a friendly amendment to add enforcement services in that list or
Okay,
enforcement options.
Yeah, Councillor Laners.
Well, yeah, point counterpoint, I guess. I think the fine enough is that you plow them in and they got to shovel their way out for 3 hours of big lumpy chunks of ice. I've had to do that once or twice, and I'd rather pay the fine. So, but anyhow, Mr. Glavin asked about sidewalks to the transit. I think I'm not sure how they're doing it right now, but the complaint typically has been the transit, the stop itself. So I'll just leave it at that, so we don't need to explore infinite possibilities of spider web of sidewalks, because I think that would be so nebulous and complicated. It'd be tough if it continues to be a problem. I'm sure snow removal gets addressed on a moderately regular basis. So, and then I like that snow angel thing too, but I don't know if that's. I don't think that's part of the discussion. But I just wanted to add some clarity to Mr. Glavin's comments.
Okay. Seeing as how the motion's on the screen, which says direct administration to conduct community consultation regarding potential service level adjustments costed in Table 2.0 and 3.0 of the report, along with neighborhood snow storage. I can't even read that word. Notions for options. Yeah, my P is missing. Don't even go there. Oh, there it is. Okay, by identifying priority one bus stops and enforcement options prior to bringing back policies 606 revisions for county consideration in September 2022. Some clarity from Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. Would it be possible to get a little bit more clarity on the snow storage?
Well, I think of neighborhood snow storage as being snow that's piled in my neighborhood and stored there, whether it's on a U-lot or whether it's on someone's lawn, or, as in the case on my street, actually on the street itself in a mountain that we had to drive around. So those, to me, that's all neighborhood snow storage where we're not picking it up and hauling it away.
Perfect. I think that's clear. Is everybody else? Any other discussion? Councillor Laners.
You brought up the alternate snow dump sites. I think you've looked. You talked about that before. So I don't know if we need to incorporate that again. If you come up with some great idea, you don't need a consultation for you to come up with a great idea and say we can save some money. I'm sure you do that on your own. So that'll add some more clarity. I don't think we're asking for looking at alternative dump sites throughout the city, unless you know. Something like that comes up.
Well, and just to clarify that, Councillor Laners, there's a huge cost, and the federal regulations state that we have to control the amount of salt that we put in those areas, and they have to be treated, and they've got to capture it in the right way. So I think it's under 500 tons. You can have them in various places. So I think there might be some option to do that. So. Thank you. I did read the report. Took me an hour and a half.
Sorry.
Okay, I'd like to call the question. Carried unanimously. Thank goodness. Thanks very much for your report. Really appreciate all the work that your staff has done, and tremendous job. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 4, correspondence, and Director Glavin will present this one.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. We recently received a request from the Downtown Association regarding Crosswalk Safety. The request was for the installation of mid-block, of rapid flashing lights at mid-block crossings. So there'd be 4 of these. That would be between 98th Street and 99th, 99th and 100th, 100th and 101st, and then 101st and 102nd. For committee's information, the approximate cost per set of these is $15,000. That's based on our previous installation of these last year. So it's approximately $60,000 is the ask. These are not something that we carry in stock, so it is something we'd have to add to capital or another funding source.
Okay, I have Councillor Blackmore in the queue.
I know from sitting on the Downtown Association board that there's been a number of complaints received regarding people who are at risk trying to cross the street at those mid-block crossings. I understand that engineering has stated that the road specs should not require flashing lights at those crosswalks. However, it seems that the type of traffic that lives in Grande Prairie and parks in a more narrow parking lane now really blocks the view of pedestrians trying to cross the road. I've noticed myself that pedestrians are hard to see, and of course they're the most at risk. Doesn't really do your vehicle that much damage when you hit someone, but the effect is catastrophic. So I feel that even though this may not fall into a priority for administration, it is a priority for the people that live in Grande Prairie. So I think we need to address this more proactively. I think we need to install the traffic flashers.
Would you like to make that motion, or?
I would ask Director Glavin, do you want a motion to proceed or a motion to bring back a report?
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I believe our
Identified funding source.
I think that would likely be the best case scenario, is to refer it back to administration. We could bring forward a report with the analysis and the funding source.
Would you change your motion?
Well, I didn't make a motion yet.
Ooh.
My other question is, can I just say in a timely manner rather than put a date onto it?
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I believe that we've recently done the analysis on these mid-block crossings, so it wouldn't take us a horrendous amount of time to get this back in front of council, likely within the next 2 to 4 weeks.
Then I move that this committee direct administration to prepare a report regarding mid-block crossings in the downtown area and report back in a timely manner, identifying procedure and identifying a funding source.
Councillor Laners?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be supporting that motion. Now we're starting to get, I want to say, we have already 4 intersections in the downtown where people can cross with lights. Now we're talking about, so that's every 200 meters. Those are the midpoint. They could go, the most they have to walk is about 30 or 40 meters, one way or the other. Lots of times to go to a signalized intersection, we have other priorities in town that could probably use this. I know we've got some other schools and those that didn't meet the criteria. I guess there's a point where you have to say we have criteria for a reason, and just because it doesn't pass the tummy test or my spidey senses, like I think sometimes when it comes to engineering and life safety, you have to mitigate the risk by allocating resources to the areas that need them the most. And if you already have 4 signalized pedestrian intersections in the downtown core, I think you could probably go to one of those as opposed to, and then put the money towards some other place in town that absolutely needs it more. So I wouldn't be supporting this motion.
Yes, and to counter that, it's a shopping area more than anything else. So I would say I will not walk down to the end of the street. I'm going to jaywalk. So, okay, if I can get my hip to work. Councillor Blackmore.
Councillor Laners raises a good point, except for one significant thing. We built mid-block crossings. If we wanted people to walk down to the traffic light, we shouldn't have built the mid-block crossings to start with. So by not making them as safe as we can, I think that we're doing half a job, and we need to finish the job and put the crosswalks in, or go back and tear them out, one or the other.
You can say the same thing about every crosswalk in town. We put crosswalks in, therefore we should put lights in there because we've already. I don't agree with that logic at all.
So just to counter your point, I think Director Glavin, have we not instituted, and you can check with administration, how many of these flashing lights are we putting in or plan to put in this summer at specific intersections?
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm not sure. Okay, just looking to our expert in the room, we don't have any in the budget this year that we'll be installing. We did install, I think, 20 or so last year. Yeah, and that was due to the fact that we received grant money from the province.
Thank you. So I'd like to call a question. We need to move on. That's carried 2-1. We'll now move. We don't have other business. We don't have bylaw and policy review. We have number 7, outstanding items list. Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. We'll start off with 1193. We're going to be moving this date back. We have a consultant that's going to be looking at the structure and the prospect of moving these to a new diamond. And I believe that is going to occur over the next few weeks, but it's likely we'd have a report back in August to committee. So our new date that we're targeting is August 16th. For the item 1197, Water North Coalition, we are going to move this to August 2nd. It's not overly time sensitive at this point, and the manager will not be available for the until August 2nd to present that report. For 1194, delivery development notices, we presented that today. For policy 1192, or for item 1192, policy 611, the Urban Developers Institute would like some additional consultation on this piece. So we're now targeting August 2nd, as we've not been able to get dates together with that group in order to discuss some of their concerns and considerations that they have. And that is all.
Okay, any other discussion?
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. Right now, we would be targeting, I think, is it August? Right now to be bringing back, I can't remember the exact date in the report. Yeah, so I guess we can remove that one and we can substitute with the new one.
Okay, who would like to make the motion? Councillor Layners.
To move that committee receive the June 7th, 2022 outstanding item list as amended for information.
That motion's in order. Carried. With that, unless there's anything else, I'd like to have this meeting adjourned.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's not bad. Well, it's better.
That was carried.